Hi, I'm Danielle.
And I'm Ty.
Together, we are hosting the NebraskaLand Bank Podcast. We promise this isn't some boring bank podcast.
That's right. We aim to entertain. Listen in every other Monday, and we'll tackle topics like finance, business, sports, community events, and maybe even a course or two of great food finds.
We're always community-minded.
Every voice.
Every topic.
Every time. So turn the volume up, settle in, and let's talk NebraskaLand. Okay, well, good morning. We're here in the NebraskaLand Bank podcast studio up on the beautiful third floor here today. Danielle didn't show up today. She's a little under the weather, but to her credit, she did complete the Spartan race down in Colorado Springs last weekend. So she's claiming her illness has nothing to do with that because of her superb, fitness after the wellness challenge. But she is under the weather today. So we've got a replacement, though, on short notice. Kim Schroll, our Chief Operating Officer for the bank, has stepped in today. And so, Kim, welcome to being co-host today.
Well, thanks. I'm just happy to be here. So excited about our guest today.
I don't know what we're going to talk about. I mean, with Danielle, I usually have to talk about The Bachelor, which I refuse to watch, and we have to talk about marketing, which is still kind of fun. But I don't. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, Ty, what I'd like to know is where do you listen to your podcast and when? We don't have a commute time in North Platte, and so that might be a time where other people listen to podcasts. And so I'm really curious to hear when and where you listen to your podcasts.
Well, sometimes weird times. If I'm in my car, I'll listen to podcasts. If I'm driving, if I'm traveling for work. Our bank serves a really large trade area. I mean, as North Platte does as a whole. So I'm on the road a lot to surrounding counties and different things. So I'll listen to podcasts on the road. Sometimes at like 4 o'clock in the morning because I wake up early and I can't sleep. I'll listen to podcasts, or I'll go walk my dog and listen to podcasts. But just, when I have a few minutes here and there, I mean, what I love about podcasts is that you can just start and stop them as you want. So if I have a quick 10 or 15 minutes where I'm working in my office after hours, I'll fire one up. But what about you? When do you listen to them, and what have you been listening to lately?
Oh, well, asking someone what they listen to is like looking to their music playlist. It's kind of like burying your soul, isn't it? So no judging, no judging. But I listen to in the morning while I'm working out. So I get about 30 to 45 minutes in. And right now I'm listening to the Bible in a Year, which I really enjoy. And then I've got 40 minutes to get ready. So I'm listening at that time. And then I bought some AirPods a couple months ago, and they connect really easily. And you can take a phone call, you can take a text. And so when I get home during my first 30 minutes of house chores, I pop those in and just let my playlist on my podcast go. So I've kind of found some time to make productivity out of time that used to not be very productive.
Cool. I think I convinced myself I'm being productive listening to it. But the problem is a lot of my podcast time, it's like Dan Patrick and Colin Cowherd and NFL fantasy football. And so in my eyes, that's productive. But,
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a fun guest in here today. Kim, would you like to do the introduction?
Oh, it's my pleasure. We have Gary Pearson with us today. He's the president and CEO of the North Platte Area Chamber and Development Corporation. And he has been in North Platte since 2015, but he has 30 years of experience in the economic development field. He was the city manager in Sydney for 16 years and the economic development director for 23 years. And we are just so excited to have everything going on here in North Platte and to talk to Gary today.
Well, thanks, Kim. It's a privilege to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Gary, North Platte is literally booming right now. I mean, we have so much going on. Talk to us about how did we get here and how do you see this and what do you think the future looks like here in economic development?
Well, nothing ever happens by accident. That's what people don't understand. It takes a lot of hard work, needs a lot of good preparation, and you got to have a great team. And you got to have the community working together. I think that's very, very important. Kind of as a student watching how community and economic development unfolds in different communities, you see communities a lot of times have internal struggles, internal fights where they exert all their energy. When you can get people on the same board, get the city, the county, the private sector, business community all working together, pulling together. And that's really the role of the Chamber Development Corporation, because we have all of those entities, including the schools, also at the table, along with some really good, strong business leadership. And I think historically, you look at what the Chamber Development Corporation has done since the merger happened bringing the two organizations together. I really like that concept because you don't have the turf protection thing or worrying about different egos or whatever, who gets credit for whatever. Everybody's just in it as a team. And you guys were both a part of laying great foundation for that to occur. And we came up with 29 strategic goals. And this was part of our certified economic development community status that the state has an exercise they put you through every 5 years to gain this status. And that tells different companies or businesses out there that are looking to locate somewhere that this community has its act together. They have the tools that you need. Obviously the LB 840 or Quality Growth Fund is a critical key part of that. The state has their various incentives. And you also need to have a shovel-ready business park. I think that's extraordinarily important. So the Twin Rivers Business Park certainly gets our foot in the door with different prospects. It's a way that we can market the community that we have a site ready to go for development. And in addition to working with all the other private landowners in the area that have good sites that are properly zoned.
If you think about that for a minute, the industrial park that we have today, and you had a recent announcement in the industrial park, right? What the name of the company, Gary?
K&M Tire Distribution Company.
And so you think back, how many years ago was it that the Walmart Distribution Center came to North Platte? I mean, approaching 15 years?
Yes. Yep.
So the decisions made at that time played a direct role in the most recent announcement in the industrial park, correct?
It was a great vision on behalf of the people who are involved in that to have an adjacent area that served as a shovel-ready business park. And I can't explain how critically important that is to get your foot in the door. A lot of times a company may not wind up locating there, but they'll give North Platte and Lincoln County a very strong area. Same philosophy we're going through right now, trying to develop a rail park. The fact that we're even talking about it, it's just amazing how many more potential industrial and business prospects we have that have reached out to us, that we have proposals in front of, because we're now on the verge of having rail access, which has always been a restriction in Lincoln County. It was an unwritten policy, but it was a situation where, with the uniqueness of Bailey Yard, the transportation dynamics, the congestion there, the railroad simply couldn't allow other access points anywhere in Lincoln County, several miles away. So we kind of opened that conversation, discussion with the railroad. I came from a situation in Sydney where we had a very unique rail park that connected to both Burlington Northern and Union Pacific and a 14-mile short line. So, and with an old Army depot that had massive big buildings. And we were able to recruit a lot of companies in there as a result of that. So when I came to North Platte, I guess I had this false illusion, oh my gosh, Bailey Yard, world's largest rail center, that there would be all kinds of possibilities, for recruiting an industry. And then you look at the profile of North Platte and you got one manufacturing company in the whole community. You go, well, that doesn't make sense, but then you learn all the dynamics of it. But I think it's just been something that's been in place for so long. I think even some of the community leadership didn't realize just how restrictive it was to.
Right. And I want to go back to the merger for a minute of Chamber and Development Corporation. Kim, were you on the board at the time of the merger, right before the merger?
Right before the merger, yeah.
Well, here's what's interesting to me. I was reflecting on this when during the mall hearings, we had existing small retailers in North Platte going and testifying to the city council, pushing for the incentives the mall needed to move their project forward. And it caused me to reflect back on the merger because I'm sure you guys talked a lot about this on the chamber board. What was a concern at that point was, well, if we have a merged organization of a Chamber of Commerce and a development corporation, will one of them get forgotten about? Or will we have too much focus on one and not the other? Will we still take care of our members? And I was reflecting on that during those hearings, that it's brought everybody together, which points to you. And so those were interesting decisions that the board made. That was well before my time on the board and well before Gary's time here.
Mm-hmm. And all oars going in the same direction is critical, as you pointed out, Gary.
Yeah, it was a bold move at the time. You don't see a lot of organizations like that across the state. So it's really something they had to just kind of wrap their arms around and figure out how that was all going to work out. And I think it's proven over time it has. And I think you're seeing some of the results of that today, all the exciting things going on. And I really have sensed with some of the recent announcements that have been made, the proposed projects that are on the table, the community's attitude has even flipped a switch a little bit, that people are pretty pumped up about the future and where we're headed. And they see some diversity in our economic opportunities coming forward, that we're not just hanging our hat on, the big major employers that for a long time, and we're very blessed to have them. I mean, they've sustained the economy here for a long time, and it's been a very, very stable economy. But as family sizes shrink, your population shrinks. The job base has probably always been pretty consistent. But if you're not building more housing with smaller family units, your population's going to dip. So it's critically important that you keep all of those momentum things. You can't just start and stop housing or labor recruitment or anything else. It has to be a very consistent effort. And your community has to be, laborers right now have the best of all worlds. They can go anywhere they want. And the pandemic proved you could even work remotely anywhere you want. So the more attractive you can make a community, likability factors, quality of life factors, recreational opportunities, the leisure time that people have are very, very important, probably more so in today's generation than any time previously. So they're going to look at all those factors. You got to have good school systems. So I think, we've looked at all those things. We made some bold moves getting the downtown moving forward. The old canopies had been there since the 70s, were showing their age, but yet there was a strong resistance to do something about that. But if you're ever going to revitalize downtown and get that historic architectural look back and take advantage of the beauty of some of those old buildings, you can't do that when you have those hindrances in place. And then you had utility issues and things that needed to be addressed. And so just things like that. Now you see what the resurgence of downtown. I think when I got to town, there was probably close to, in some of those blocks, 50% vacancy rates. And you couldn't even tell really where one business was and another one started. It was just kind of all hidden in there. And now you've got a situation where almost all those buildings are full, in some cases 100% on a block, and demand people who want there. And we got the Parkade Plaza into local ownership. Nautil Company, out of Omaha had owned that since its inception, and got the Pawnee Hotel off dead center, and got some things going on there. It's probably not as quick as people want to see, but that's all of those issues are critically important. No matter how many whistles and bells, the great things you have out on your interstate and the other cool things you do in the community, you're still going to be judged somewhat by your downtown. It's important because that's a tie to the past. That's where the community blossomed, the heart of the community started. And so there's a lot of history there. There's just kind of still a romantic appeal about downtowns. And the more cool you can make them, the better off the community's going to be.
Every one is unique. Every downtown is unique. Yep. Kim, what's your favorite building downtown?
Oh my gosh. I'm not sure that I can pick one. I mean, bringing those awnings down brought to light the beauty of all of those buildings, and what each of the building owners have added their own flavor, I think is so cool. I mean, the signage, at Hirschfeld's or Blakely's building, I mean, they're all fantastic. The frontage of the Cedar Room, I can't pick a favorite one, but the effort that took to make that happen wasn't just downtown. Gary, the chamber was very involved. The city, the collaborative effort to make that happen was years in the making. It's so nice to see it.
I've certainly learned, as you reflect back on some of the recent successes, that the energy and bringing people together is the most important thing. The first thing you said today when we started visiting is you learn that if people get on the same page, you can move the needle. And otherwise, you just spend all your time arguing about things. Now, Gary, one thing that we're looking for some education on, and I think our listeners would really be interested in, is we think about economic development at the local level. oh, are we going to provide a TIF incentive, or of course, the big EEA discussion with the mall, or our quality growth fund. But that's a small part of economic development. So I want to hear about your world and what it's like when you're dealing with companies that are in other states and they're looking at state incentives or potentially federal incentives or tax credits. What's the world really like? What's it like to talk to somebody who's making a decision for a company that's out of Ohio or Pennsylvania? What's it like in economic development with them?
Well, it's just a fact of life that incentives are part of the game in economic development, and everybody's going to ask about them. What does your community have? How does your state incentive package work, and so forth. So you've got to be competitive, and at least by having a quality growth fund. And the state incentives have been kind of reinvented 3 times now, and so each time they try to do a little bit of improvement on it. But all those are key factors. But in the end, it's all about you've still got to sell them on your community. Labor and housing is always an issue there too. But I've found over my lifetime, professional lifetime of working in economic development, the trust factor. You got to build a relationship. You don't go telling them a bunch of things that aren't possible. You definitely lay it out that their political processes can't guarantee anything, but we're gonna be there arm in arm with you. We're gonna get it to the starting gate, and we'll get it to the end gate, and we'll have a team working on this, and we'll be at the public hearings, and we'll support the projects, and it's a matter of building that trust, so you learn over time the things that work, and some of the things that don't work. But every project's just a little bit different. Every person you deal with is just a little bit different. I mean, I've worked on projects 2, 3, 4 years. In one case, I worked with a company for 10 years before they finally decided to make a decision on locating when I was in Sydney. So it doesn't happen overnight. That's the other thing. People have to have patience. And that was probably, when I first came to North Platte, you got to get used to every community has a different set of politics, and you got to gain that trust when you're the new person on the block, and build those relationships with city officials, county officials, state officials, business community. I mean, the business community here is just phenomenal. Just the Chamber and Development Corporation is a great example. You got the ambassadors and the hostesses. I mean, that was one of the most pleasant surprises to me coming here. What a great network of people that really care about the community, that step up in a volunteer sense and are always there, and they always got your back, and they're always going to be there when you need them. And it's just that's reassuring. That's heartwarming. That tells you a lot about the fabric of the community and the tradition that's here. And so we're just really excited about the things that are kind of sitting on the table now. But we got to get them to the starting gate, and then you got to make sure you get them to the finish line. So we certainly have, I believe, as many opportunities as we've had for a long, long time in this community. And we're going to win some. The mall was a big win, a little more struggle than what I think a lot of us thought it should be or would be. But in the end, it still wins. And it also tells you in the end how important even one vote is. How critically important it is that your community officials are engaged, educated on the issues, and their decisions matter a lot in the end.
Well, since Danielle's not here today, that means we get to mix things up a little bit, right, Kim?
Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
what you're thinking? So normally our format in the podcast is that we visit with our guests and then we move into the trivia at the end. But we're going to move the trivia up today, and that's going to give us some time to talk about the categories of the trivia a little bit. So today's trivia is based on economic development, since we have our expert here, Gary. And again, Gary, the format is we're going to ask you, between Kim and I, we're going to ask you 3 questions. If you get 2 of the 3 correct, then you get to donate $100 in your name. We will donate $100 to the charity of your choice. And if you would lose the trivia and not get 2 of the 3 right, then that $100 will roll into the pot for our next guest at the next podcast. So either way, it's a win. So we're going to kick off the trivia a little bit
and
early
Ty,
here
just
today.
to clarify, the trivia is multiple choice, right? So
Yeah,
So,
we're going to go multiple choice.
Yeah.
But it's not always going to be C, like they tell you when you're in high school. It's not always going to be C. But yes, it is multiple choice. So, okay, I think I get to fire the first question here. So, during the Great Depression and in World War II, housing construction was practically non-existent, almost like what we saw in our country during the pandemic. And so there was a huge shortage of housing when our soldiers returned home after World War II. So at that point, to assist developers, there were land grants and all sorts of incentives. And you've probably heard of the VA loan program that came out of the GI Bill that came out of World War II. And at that point in time, developers were building track houses, 3 bedrooms, fireplace, gas furnace on usually a 7,500 square foot lot. And the GI Bill was designed to make it very affordable for these veterans. So here's the question. What do you think the average cost of a home in the U.S. was, one of those 3-bedroom track homes, right coming out of World War II? Was it A, $7,400, B, $20,000, or C, $50,000?
A,
$7,400. He's right. So he gets the first one right. One thing we love doing here at NebraskaLand is helping people buy that home. We do have a VA loan offering, but I will tell you one of the most rewarding things in banking is to assist people with that, especially first-time home purchase, isn't it, Kim?
Well, there's oftentimes we get to see people's dreams come true, and sometimes that takes some time to realize that, but a home move-in is immediate, and it's so gratifying.
Yeah, it really is. Now, Gary, we're short homes in North Platte. I wish we could do more home lending right now in North Platte as a bank because we just don't have enough homes. Where do you see that going? I mean, how do you see housing evolving here in North Platte?
Boy, it's a tough issue. And here again, it comes back to incentives to get the prices of homes because of the high cost, the shortage of contractors to a level that matches the wage scale and what people are looking for. A lot of times you have to have that infrastructure assistance. And that's where we come back to talking about tax increment financing, which now there are 2 different TIF laws that can help with that. But it becomes controversial all the time because there's some people out of the philosophy that incentives shouldn't be used on housing. But when you build housing, you make it easier for the employers to recruit people here. You make it easier for people to move here that are maybe looking at retirement or they're sick and tired of what's going on in the big city or the Front Range. And I think that accelerated itself during the pandemic.
Yeah, in my opinion, construction, home building is the lifeblood of economic development because if you do not have homes available, people will not move to your town. It's that simple. And it's an easy thing to forget about. And I've really learned after spending a lot of years working on this, it does not take care of itself. It takes a tremendous effort to incent housing.
Well, and kudos to both of you for the Shot in the Arm program. What a tool. And I know you were both involved in that inception. And maybe, Gary, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it really ties the brains behind putting that whole thing together. And he's the one that really convinced the board that was a worthy cause to experiment on, does this entice the developer enough to step forward and build housing? And it's phenomenally successful. That program was just in its infancy in place when I came to town. So I got to work with the developers who had committed to do that housing. And there was 48 new housing units built in phase 1. We did a phase 2 part of that, partnered with the Rural Workforce Housing Fund. I think the state actually, they were encouraged to look at putting that whole program together. And I think North Platte was kind of an example they used that say, they've proven a little bit of incentive there will maybe move the needle on developers because there's not a rural community in Nebraska that's not facing this struggle and challenge. So we actually had 5.5 times the requests that we have money to go around. And sometimes it's not the amount, it's the fact that the community was willing to partner, step up, and understand the risk that they're taking. And it's just made a world of difference. It just has totally made a world of difference.
Well, it's the show of support, and that's a lot of what our committee learned with Shot in the Arm. It's telling them we want to help you. We believe the need is that deep. And then all of a sudden the subcontractors think, well, gosh, if the city's giving a little bit, maybe I can give a little bit, or the material supplier, maybe I can give a little bit, the builder, maybe I can give a little bit. And so it's the energy it creates, talks about what we started with today. And that's the lesson I think we learned as a community from Shot in the Arm, was that if you get everybody on board and say, we need to do this, what's it going to take? And that's how it was developed. It was done by our committee, asking the developers, the home builders, what would it take for you to build a spec home?
Yeah. What an outstanding collaborative effort.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that kind of leads us to question number 2 on our trivia. And I'm going to ask you this one, Gary. So the state of Nebraska has a significant incentive program that is handled at the state level. And the current program available for application by businesses expanding or relocating in Nebraska, is it called A, the Cornhusker Expansion Act, B, the Nebraska Advantage Act, or C, the Nebraska Imagine Act?
Well, now it is C. And you're throwing me softballs here,
So they wouldn't be softballs to all of us or our listeners.
Right.
Of course, its predecessor was the Nebraska Advantage Act, and the predecessor to the Nebraska Advantage Act was the Employment Investment Growth Act.
I want to dig into the weeds just a little bit on this, because I think we lose perspective locally of how much of this is going on outside of ours. I mean, if a state incentive package is used on a local project, you might not even know that it's being done, because a lot of that I know has a confidential nature to it. But let's pretend that Kim and I owned a manufacturing company in Ohio, and we needed to expand out to this part of the country to serve our Western clients. That's our example here. And we were going to build a $10 million facility, and we were going to hire 50 people, just as an example. And we were thinking about coming to Iowa, Colorado, or Nebraska. And we scheduled an appointment with you to look at North Platte. And we're also talking to the Nebraska Economic Development Department about the Nebraska Imagine Act. What would that look like, Gary? What do those programs, what would you guys talk to them about? And what would the Imagine Act do for our company?
Well, one thing I always do when we're working with prospects is, I've been around long enough in this field that I have great relationships built with a lot of the state officials and Department of Economic Development. So I'll reach out to them and give them exactly what I've been told, the investment, the jobs, the wages, benefit package, that kind of thing. They'll put it into the system and spit out exactly what all those different tax credits are that they can tap into that was directly coming off any state income tax they're paying. There are some sales tax refunds that they can accumulate. It's all based on performance. That's what I love about incentives is it's performance based. You don't perform, you don't win in the end. It's not handing people a bucket of money. It's like, okay, you create the jobs, you put the investment in, the accountability factor. You got to prove that it happened, and then you're rewarded on the back end of it. A lot of times on refunds or credits.
Well, and I think people lose sight of how big the scale can be on that. On the Nebraska Economic Development Department's website, they actually have a calculator where you can run some scenarios. And to give you an example, if somebody brings a $25 million facility that has 110 jobs in manufacturing to a community like North Platte, and you run through the calculator, they could qualify for over $5 million worth of tax incentives. I mean, that's a significant amount of money. I mean, in essence, if making a $25,000 plant investment and all those wages. And so, sometimes I think we lose perspective on if we're talking about a quality growth fund loan or we're talking about TIF or EEA, but there's things going on outside of us that are sometimes very large, but we wouldn't do it as a state if it wasn't a win-win opportunity for us.
Absolutely. And this is new revenue being created.
Right.
It's not taken from existing resources. That's another thing a lot of people don't understand with incentives is the burden's still on the company to perform. And they create all this new wealth. They're just getting some of the reward back for what they're doing. And so and none of that would be there if they chose to go somewhere else.
Well, Gary's already won the trivia, so he's already won the $100, but we're still going to have some fun because we got one more question.
Okay.
And I love history because I do too. I think history gives you perspective on the present, the future a little bit. So this question has a little bit of a historical nature. Okay. Which U.S. federal government act passed in 1904 as an expansion of the Homestead Act allowed claimants?
I know it. Kincaid Act.
Oh, this is too easy.
Didn't even need to hear the whole question.
The Kincaid Act. The Kincaid Act, think about the past. Go back to 1904 and our state or our country passes the Kincaid Act, which you mentioned 37 counties in Nebraska.
Yeah, those were the counties.
Kincaid Act was the 37 counties where you could claim a section of land. I mean, 640 acres or a 1 by 1 mile by 1 mile sector of land. But performance-based, you had to agree to put $1.25's worth per acre of improvements on the property.
And some trees, yeah.
Yeah, and some trees, that's right.
You still see remnants of, even if you drive across the sand hills, you'll see a little clump of trees here, a little clump of trees there. Those were tree claims, back in the
So the Kincaid Act was not invented to recognize the Kincaider Brewery, even though they do a great job, right? I think they came after the fact, right?
Yeah. Moses Kincaid, he was a congressman from Nebraska. So.
Well, and actually he was from O'Neill, my hometown.
Really? Yeah.
The Irish capital of Nebraska, O'Neill.
Cool.
So a little bit of history there. And he replaced William Neville, who lived in North Platte, when he decided not to rerun for Congress. And William was the father of Heath Neville of North Platte, who later became governor.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So you think about that, a congressman from O'Neill who replaced a congressman from North Platte, in essence, put an act in federal legislation. Think of how many lives that changed. Think of how many people we know, who would they be or where they are today. And so the stuff we do in economic development really makes a difference on the course of history that our future takes, doesn't it, Gary?
Absolutely. I've used this argument a lot when I'm dealing with groups that don't understand incentives. And when we start doing that, and I said, well, have you ever heard of the Homestead Act, the Kincaid Act, or the Transcontinental Railroad Act? How many of you come from farm ranch families? How many of you have family members who work for the railroad? None of that would have happened without the largest incentive package ever adopted in the United States. All of them were collectively. And so the incentives have been around as long or longer than the state of Nebraska has. And that's why it opens up some eyes when you tell people that. And then they go, oh, never thought about that.
Well, now the magical question is, you've got $100 to the charity of your choice that we will donate in your name, Gary. Where's it going?
To the new playground effort that's going forward. And I'm going to match it. I'm going to match the $100.
Oh, wow, Gary, how generous.
Yeah, fantastic. Those folks are near their goal. And you look at the public-private partnership going on there. I mean, the city's role is just to provide a little land and help with some organization, but that has been a tremendous effort by a wonderful group of people raising money.
Oh, it's just awesome. And it, again, shows when you work together collaboratively and you believe in something and you're willing to see it to the finish line. That's what happens as a result. I mean, it's just a fabulous, wonderful success story.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two takeaways I have today. It's how important collaboration is. And Gary, you're so impactful in that in many ways in our community. And also that economic development is a marathon, not a race.
Amen to that. And you can blame Ty for me being in North Platte. So,
well,
thank you, Ty.
Now, that's actually kind of a funny story because when I was on the chamber board at the time and on the committee when we were going to hire a new president CEO, and we had some great candidates. I mean, really great candidates. And in particular, we had two great candidates. And so we sat around the room and we thought, well, gosh, which one should we choose? And somebody had the idea. They said, why don't we figure out how to hire both of them? And that's what we did at the time. And you've served us so well, Gary. Just can't thank you enough for everything you've done in North Platte and for coming here today. So it's nice to have you here.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
And thanks to NebraskaLand Bank for everything that you do for this community. I mean, you live it. You don't appreciate you walk the walk. You don't just talk the talk. I mean, phenomenal what you do for the community and how you support it and how the people that are associated with the bank, they step up and they help in so many different ways. So it's a great asset we have here in North Platte. Thank you.
Well, when we started the bank, we decided that we were going to give back to the community more than we were going to spend on advertising ourselves. And there were honestly some people that felt that advertising plan was flawed. That how can you sell yourself if you're not talking about yourself? And we said it's because we live in a community that is grateful. And they in turn have supported us because of the efforts and what we have given back. And so it's a win-win for all of us. We're all better because we live in this community and we're heading in the same direction.
Thanks for what you do.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by NebraskaLand National Bank. We are member FDIC and equal housing lender. Learn more about our podcast at NebraskaLandBank.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and find us on Facebook. Thanks for listening to the NebraskaLand Bank Podcast. Community-minded, every voice, every topic, every time.